have today with us Professor Jagdish Sheth, who, frankly speaking, now no longer needs any form of introduction. We are, sir, absolutely delighted to have you with us today and are looking forward with great anticipation to your very seminal thoughts on why sustainability matters. Those of us who've been in the area of sustainability and CSR for some time now regard you literally as our guru, and so many of your thoughts have inspired us over all of this time. We owe you, sir, a very deep debt of gratitude. While you will hear Professor Sheth and will benefit greatly from what he has to say, this is also an opportunity to tell you that India is poised right at this very moment at the cusp of what we might call the sustainable development revolution. We all recall that the MDPs started in 2000. We had 8 Millennium Development Goals. And in 2015, when the world reassessed what we had done in those 15 years, what came about was the fact that the MDPs were nowhere in sight and that India, in fact, had been a miserable failure. With that, the next decade and a half, 2015 to 2030, we're looking at a whole set of new sustainable development goals, and we're moving in a direction where, hopefully, the planet will be far better placed than it was at the turn of the millennium. Where does that leave India? It leaves it in a situation where this is an area where India's performance will literally affect the way the world is going to go forward. Just as China's role in the MDPs was so important that more than 50% of the achievement of the planet lay with one country, so too, for this period, the next decade and a half, India's contribution will be perhaps, and if we succeed, half the contribution of the world. And we can do that if we have 2 or 3 things. 1, institutions which devote themselves to the concept of what we have now understood as responsible management, where institutions such as the IILM take upon themselves the responsibility of showing their commitment to training, developing, and putting out into the real world managers who understand the meaning of the triple Ps. That the inverted pyramid of what Leckington had said to us in the late 90s, that the planet comes first, responsibility comes first, much before profits do. What does our nation need to ensure that we are on track apart from institutions? We need professionals. We need trained professionals. We need sensitized professionals. We need professionals who understand that with all the work that they do in whatever be their chosen field, in the area of sustainability, in the area of innovation, in the area of CSR, they are totally equipped to deliver. If we don't have them, this country will never achieve that goal, those goals which we want to achieve by 2030. And therefore, in the IILM, we have now developed a curriculum, a completely unique curriculum that will help to deliver both interactively and online as well as offline to busy professionals the opportunity of understanding the meaning, the worth, and how the deliverables will operate in these 3 areas of sustainability, CSR, and innovation. We will have opportunity later on to discuss at some length on how that course will be developed, who it will attract. But the attraction of that course is that a busy professional can quickly access it, understand it online, do it at his or her own leisure. Even the classes will be on weekends. And therefore, it will be easy for people to grasp what they need to do, how much time they need to do it in, and what at the outcome that they will get as takeaways. All of this awaits you, and we hope that at the end of the deliberations today, we will have on the one hand the wisdom of Dr. Sheth, and on the other, an opportunity for many of you here to understand this course, get to work on it, access it, and of course, take it on board. With these few words, it is my very pleasant duty, sir, to request you to come and address this audience. Thank you.
Thank you. The issue of sustainability is no longer a nice thing to do, like a CSR, I want to contribute back, but it's a necessity. And I've done significant analysis before this book was written even as to what happened. The biggest change worldwide over thousands of years of civilization only happened with the Industrial Revolution. The world was fine. It was sustainable. Industrial Revolution made one key difference, and we are paying the consequences now with a rising curve toward a crisis. It divorced production from consumption. And before the Industrial Revolution, we produced in the same place and consumed in the same place. Same time, not even overnight. No refrigeration, nothing, and we lived happily thereafter. By making production and consumption separate, now we can scale up production, but it needs to be shipped out some other place where the markets are. Local market cannot consume all that you produce. So we went through economies of scale concepts, and that created a huge carbon footprint. Carbon footprint, I've done a lot of research, and I'll come to a conclusion on that side that we probably have never thought about. Largest carbon footprint does not happen in the factory, which is where we focus. Does not even happen in the transport, big one. Just to tell you, in my own city, I was on the board of Community Foundation of Greater Atlanta, which is a charitable organization. We give out about grants to 4,500 NGOs. And one of the initiatives we have done, which is in the most disadvantaged, very crime-infested neighborhood near the city downtown called Pittsburgh, and we said we will build hydroponic units to grow lettuce. Lettuce to Atlanta comes all the way from California. It is not fresh because it travels. It's not air-shipped. 2,500 miles of carbon footprint is made. It is cheaper to buy from there, and we said, can we make it local? All customers have been already lined up. It'll give about 42 people who are otherwise nothing but going to the gang activity, will make them as employable citizens. This is in urban city, think about that one. And it is possible hydroponic techniques is now mature enough. And of course, we have a sunshine, not like in India. It's very possible, therefore, to have energy efficient units you can build. So the two big hospital groups have said, we will buy your lettuce. We don't have to buy. There's a company called Whole Foods you might have heard about. They like to do local sourcing. They said, we will buy from you. Another supermarket called Publix, ranked number 1 in India, in America. And they said, we will be willing to buy. And we are now negotiating with Kroger. It's about a $7 or $10 million investment you make upfront capital, which is what the community foundation, through charity people who will give the donation, we can invest in that one, train the people. But the biggest carbon footprint is not even that. It is at home. 70% of all carbon footprint happens at home. Home is the biggest polluter in America. Our materials are all chemically based walls that we produce. We just prefab and assemble there. It spews a lot of negative pollutant in the air, which is why in America when a home burns, it burns with fumes which are noxious. Car sitting there and car as a part of the home transport is another big polluter, whether we admit or not, and that's why if you were in the previous session, I'm as strongly advocate about no way out but electric vehicles as Amitabh Kant was mentioning as a policy in India. It cannot happen through market process. Market fails here, so one has to do through policy. Interesting. The home pollutes many ways because we have refrigeration. Refrigeration is one of the biggest carbon footprint producers. The second most place it happens is in the supermarkets, where we have these 24/7 freezers and refrigerators constantly producing footprint. So footprint is created little by little, but when you aggregate, it becomes massive. Fluorocarbons, remember, were the key ingredients in refrigeration. We banned that, it was creating a hole. About 2 years ago, a year and a half, my whole family, we went to see New Zealand because it is one of those places everybody talks about, great country. First thing they told us was that make sure you wear dark glasses, preferably a hat, because ozone layer, south part of the Arctic, southern Arctic, is actually having a hole. It's here. All of the documents that we see, and we think it happened because of the divorce of production from consumption. So environmental sustainability is as simple as, can we put production and consumption real time and real location rather than time separated, location separated. Isn't that interesting? And today we do have, let's say, the Toyota model of making things, which means I can do mass customization, I can do just-in-time, cycle time, I can do quality assurance, and today I can produce a small unit with the same cost efficiency as a large factory. So how do I distribute factories in the neighborhoods, which is a key architecture we are all trying to make a change. Sustainability, industrial revolution created a second major disaster. Scientific community came in, we abandoned all the traditional practices, either normatively created by religion, which is a great something to say, behave properly. We did all that stuff. All the rituals have meanings from a health and wealth preservation, mostly health preservation. We abandoned there with a belief system that nature is inorganic. When I get a coal or an iron or any material, we believe it's inorganic, and therefore I can use it and abuse it and exploit it. But the nature is always biological, living, breathing organization. As we have seen with corals right now, which is there, we know, they look like inanimate, and the worst mistake we made was to overutilize those without thinking about replacing that. Nature is very nurturing till you abuse it. And when you abuse living organizations, it's a built-in passive resistance. We have seen this in animals. When you abuse the animals, they stop cooperating with you. Humans, definitely, when you abuse human beings, they stop cooperating you. So nurturing nature positively, there is plenty of surplus it will generate. I find fascinating. I am fond of cow worship as an economic livelihood, not as a faith-based thing. I've done even return on investment on a cow as opposed to a factory. It is a lot more sophisticated, a lot better return than a factory if you treat cow right. It gives you from the day the calf is born, cow is there, till it passes away is just incredible. I will add one more anecdote before formal presentation. What we need in many ways, therefore, is to focus on the consumer, the consumption side. And therefore, we are thinking about how do we make people mindful consumption. Like anything, if you are conscious, we all don't want to damage the environment, but we are not even aware in our consumption that we are damaging the environment. We used to dispose it off. I'm a vegetarian, so we eat lots of fruits and vegetables, buy raw, like go to bazaar, just like here, sabji mandi, and then make it at home. We used to throw it away in the garbage disposal. Then one day, my wife and I simply said, why don't we just collect that in a basket and every day put it out in the backyard? In 24 hours, it is gone. Nature is the best waste manager. We have seen the movies in African safaris where the vultures clean up everything. Have you seen that thing? There's not a single waste. So I am curious, so I experiment, add things in that disposal to see what particular thing goes away, does not go away. And I'm amazed. I don't know who comes to get it, whether those are squirrels, birds, or raccoons, which we have quite a lot. We have no idea. But it is disposed of by nature. So nature can teach a lot more than science, which is the point we are making. I think we need to wake up the scientific community to look upon what nature does biologically in terms of having the ecosystem for sustainability purposes. So that's one area. Sustainability will be mandated more and more. It's not just a nice thing to do. I think the United Nations Millennium Goals, triple bottom line as it is called, people, planet, and profit. Profit alone is not sustainable. In fact, the way we have done profit, shareholder value, is so intensely that actually it is likely to collapse capitalism as an institution. For the sake of surviving an institution, to serve not just one stakeholder, but all stakeholders now becomes a game of survival. So people who became capitalist in their mindset, starting with Adam Smith, all the capitalism thinkers, etc., are being questioned that is the obligation of the corporation is just to make money. Remember, Milton Friedman had said bluntly, the business of business is business, social agenda is not to be mixed together. That's obsolete thinking now. It has to be built into it. It's not just CSR money I give while I'm doing the environmental damage or I'm not serving the community. I'll make last comment before any formal presentation because time is quite late. I found very fascinating that when you go and work for a corporation that is located in small town where they began, even though they are multinational, Whirlpool Corporation is one of them, Benton Harbor, Michigan. Kohler is another one, the people who make plumbing products, toilets and all that stuff. Large, it's a true multinational corporation. There the family, which is very wealthy family, lives and breathes in the community. Every Sunday, this is a Christian area, the church is a great equalizer. No matter how wealthy you are, you must come to the church and be humble and show that there is somebody above you. Most of the problems in many corporate enterprises, especially entrepreneurial startup enterprises, they think there is nobody else, they are held accountable. But the faith basically makes that pressure. Community is watching you, whether you at least have a respect for an entity called some God, whatever it is, a faith, great equalizer. All of the people live in the same township. Your manager's children go to the same school as your children or grandchildren go. Your neighbors are your managers, so you have an informal communication rather than only formal hierarchy with which you go in their office of the chairman and MD, for example, which is again access to the family, and the family leadership is very outside the workplace. You have to attend funeral services. You have no choice. You are conspicuously absent. Now, this is the irony. Those small town headquarters of large companies never got corrupted because they understood the role supplier creates for their well-being. Suppliers go out of their way to sacrifice to make you money. The role your employees play, customers play, not just investors. The system got corrupted when these companies relocated to where the capital markets are. So they went to New York as headquarters because analysts are there, investors are there, and all of a sudden the board and the chairman of the company think there is only one stakeholder called shareholder, and other stakeholders don't matter. And that comes in the way. So we have a book, which is where I started this journey. Actually, it goes back to my early undergraduate education here. But we wrote a book called Forms of Endearment, which has led to conscious capitalism movement, 31 chapters worldwide. And John Mackey, who is the founder of World Foods, I never knew the company even, because when you talk to the company, the public relations people will give you information which is biased by definition. That's their role. So we did our own research, and we found that companies ultimately, out of 200 or so nominated by people, we reduced it down to about 30 companies. I had a hypothesis that companies located in small towns will be more stakeholder-oriented. Companies located in capital markets will be more shareholder-oriented. It came out exactly as you would expect. But the surprising finding was that these companies, and among that one, not all of them were listed companies, private companies always are more stakeholder-oriented because there is no quarter-by-quarter pressure to perform. So they take a longer view. They invest into the community. Most of these companies began when the community provided them natural resources like the riverbeds, the plant, etc. In India, the same thing is true. Remote parts where the raw materials are, we put factories. Hindalco factories began not in Mumbai, please. That's the key difference. Culture was different when the company was based over there. You lived and breathed with the community, so you are conscious about the triple bottom line by definition. So how do we do that? Either relocate the companies to where the roots are, or somehow embed the thought process that you are accountable, measurable, in terms of financial reporting on triple bottom line. That's the only way out. I find sitting on the boards of large companies that we as outside board members are only asked to share, look for the shareholder value. To me, that's a governance problem by board members. Board should raise the question, are we creating value or welfare of our employees? Or is the shareholder value created at the expense of employees, at the expense of the community, at the expense of the nature or planet, at the expense which is a part of the community, and at the expense of suppliers especially? All my research has shown that all of us want to be world-class marketers, great brand name, customer delight, customer satisfaction. Most large corporations are really poor in terms of suppliers. They are abusive of their suppliers. Largest corruption in a corporation usually is in the procurement department, always. So we are now changing thinking. What's the role of a corporation in a society? And nobody will remain. If you abuse the ecosystem will shut you down on that one. So this is like a survival of capitalism itself is under pressure now. And this is resonating. Every large CEO of a large corporation now understands that shareholder value is not the obligation they have. Fascinating. Now, it sounds like new religion they have discovered. Well, that was built into the public sector enterprises in India. Remember, you were supposed to take care of your employees through investing in training, through investing in the community. And I will tell you, and I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody, but I think this nation is leading the way in mandatory CSR tax of 2%. I know my capitalist friends don't like it, but it's absolutely essential because now it's a part of financial reporting, which means as a board member, I have a fiduciary responsibility that that's a genuine thing company is doing, just I have to watch the financial numbers. So responsibility falls on me as a board member. And board members don't like to take risks for themselves. They are held accountable, not just the management. The 2% tax last year in this country at the level that we tax among corporations is about $5 billion of additional contribution the society or corporations can make to the society. And why there is a reason it was created, I talked to the people who created that and the cabinet, different government than the current government. And the answer was that there was a tax on the public sector enterprises. When you open up for competition, 2% of net income is a huge disadvantage for the public sector enterprises. You've got to have a level playing field if you want them to compete. You can't tie up their hands and feet and say, now compete with the private sector. This is the reason why they impose the tax, to equalize the level playing field. It has created a wake-up call, and my own belief is that India has become an experiment for the world. If the capitalists don't wake up in the rest of the world, they will start having legislation similar to India, whether it's a 2%, 0.5%, I don't care. It always happens with mandating some fashion if the market fails in some fashion. This is interesting. So this journey on environmental sustainability began from those roots, okay? So that, Smita, you know that, okay, as a background. And you are teachers, both of you are creating the course. So the next book that we wrote with a colleague, Suha Sapte, who was the Chief Sustainability Officer at Kimberly-Clark, which is a large multinational. Besides growing trees, as you read, they harvest the trees, etc., they have done more things than people realize because they sell diapers. After you use the diaper, how do you recollect back? It's your obligation not just to sell, but dispose it off right. Incredible company. They sell sanitary napkins. Again, there's a disposal problem, right? How do you manage that? It's your responsibility as a corporation. It does not stop at selling, but stops in consumption and post-consumption, which is the whole area. So we begin to start saying that why sustainability matters. So I'll take slides quickly if it's okay. So let me just show the slides first very quickly. Just as quality and customer satisfaction, here is the twist. If you make sustainability as a competitive advantage for yourself, we will invest. If it's a nice thing to do or an obligation, we will never embrace it. Just as quality movement. Japanese created a wake-up call by hiring an American statistician, Ward Deming, who I knew. He was an NYU professor. I was at Columbia, much older than I. He became a hero in Japan when Japanese finally embraced that selling cheap goods at low prices is not the future in export-oriented marketing, put investment in quality assurance. JETRO, which is the export market, had a quality assurance. You could not sell the product unless you met global standards. So quality and customer satisfaction became the real change from whatever people were doing in the companies. So companies' competitive advantage in the last century, second half, in the 80s roughly as a movement, we tried to equalize with Malcolm Baldrige Award. There's a Deming Award. I got involved into that one in terms of measuring, etc. And sustainability and shared value. Don't create wealth for yourself, but create wealth for the community, to the employees, suppliers. Who said shareholder should get all the share of profitability that you create, which is the thinking around here. So shared value is now heavily promoted by a good influencer called Michael Porter as an economist. From shareholder value, one is now thinking more and more shared value, and his paper is actually resonating with large corporations. He's a very good economist influencing the corporate world as a competitive advantage in this century. Quality delivered both bottom line profitability. People who engaged in quality said there was a cost reduction, there was no wastage, etc. Once you embrace Six Sigma, through cost reduction and customer satisfaction, deliver the top line. Customers wanted to buy again from you, buy more from you, share of wallet rather than a share of the market share. And now we are thinking about more. I can buy a bunch of things from the company because company is so good. Amazon has clearly shown it is no longer an online bookseller, but it can sell anything because it treats customers as a customer centricity, work backwards, etc. So just as quality delivered bottom line and customer satisfaction top line, we think the same thing will happen with sustainability. It will improve both the bottom line through cost reduction and shared value enable top line growth because community will nurture and invest in you. So I'll just quickly go through because there's no time. I know I'm as much anxious to get off the podium as you are sitting there, so let me just go. Let me give you the good news and the bad news. First, the bad news. Sustainability will encounter strong resistance both internally and externally. Externally would be definitely capital markets. Show me the returns. Not over 10 years, 15 years, but hopefully in a year or something like that. How do you as a professional manager fight that? That's a very important one. You have to co-opt your board members to go along with you in the process. And internally, there are people who are skeptics. It's really, we have people at very high positions in America, elected officials, who don't believe there is an environmental problem. Right? It's a hoax. It's all Photoshop. When people are showing documentary after documentary that all the Alaskan ice is melting, so is Himalayas. It's not just a phenomenon on the American Alps or European Alps, it is worldwide. It's documented. We know global warming is taking place. Countries like Maldives are thinking they'll be sunk under as the other islands have sunk. And my son and I would like to do a whole family together to see Maldives before it goes down, which is a real problem. You see? In a crisis. We are struggling with this one on the East Coast in Florida. It's sinking. Beach homes are all getting demolished. Massive destruction. If you look at the cost of each of the hurricanes that we have, Michael was the last destroyer. Do you know that in the state of Georgia, Michael went through, wiped out all the crops. We grow peanuts, which is underground, fortunately. Georgia peaches, pecan. We are the largest pecan producer in the nation, which is a huge market. And farmers in Georgia committed suicide this year. So suicide by farmers is not just an Indian scene, it is in the most affluent nation. These are the kinds of societal events, and today in a social media, you can't hide. I find one of the interesting areas about social media is that it totally blurs your personal and professional life. At one time, I could have my personal life and I behave in a certain way, and a professional life. Today, it's impossible. Don't even try. Only way out is prevention rather than apology. Google knows more about you than you do. If I want to know what I did yesterday, I do a Google search on me. They know where I was. Down the road, they will know which restaurant I went, what I ordered. Are you with me? Isn't that interesting? So you got to be scared. And today they can store information forever. So there's a backtracking now, right? And you have seen world-class leaders, either political leaders or corporate leaders, have been pulled down from being somebody to being nothing. You've seen this instance, right? Not limited to the entertainment industry, movies, which is famous for that, but regular corporations. And think about how corporations' shareholder value declines in the process. There are researchers who are doing that to say personal indiscretion by the leadership of the corporation, how damaging it is not only to the individual, his life is ruined, of course, but to the entity who nurtured that person, gave the leadership opportunity. So these are the issues we are struggling right now. So it will require both internal and external marketing. For the first time, marketing becomes important and relevant, which is interesting, because marketing is taken by the side. It's all about hustling, lying, deceptive advertising. Now marketing becomes really mainstream, like innovation is as important, which is the point. The good news is that sustainability and shareholder value will be harder to imitate. So a company that does this well, I can duplicate. It's not that easy to duplicate. It's massive change in the culture, the processes, the systems, and a commitment. Without an economic or environmental crisis, it is hard to bring about corporate transformation. I find corporations don't change till there is a crisis. Then they transform, like a reincarnation kind of stuff. So ultimately, sustainability, I've concluded, is a marketing problem. So I'll take one more slide and then I'll stop, because there's plenty of material and we can have a dialogue with you, any questions you have. So we have to reposition the corporation. This is the mission of the corporation. The board has to go along. Management has to propose this thing. And hopefully the board will be won over. Otherwise, the company may not survive. From shareholder to shared value, we already talked about that one. And from market-driven, what does my customer want, as opposed to what the customer should do. So what we call is from market-driven to market-driving. We have to lead the market in terms of change, lead the stakeholders to embrace this thing, rather than us saying, let me listen to the congregation and what religion they want. Religion always says, I will tell you what's good for you, which is a very different way of thinking. Just as we re-engineered the corporation in the 80s to survive massive change, downsizing, right-sizing, outsourcing, all this stuff, we will reposition the corporation for the new millennium. So here are the factors. I will not go into why and how. I just want to tell you there are 9 stakeholders. And each stakeholder is important to us as a corporation to make a commitment and influence them. So the doers are the 3. How do you motivate consumers to actually not damage the environment through your product? I must tell you, today consumers are looking meaning and a purpose in consumption. It's not just good for me, but am I doing good things for the society? Which means they are ready, actually. How can we push it more and give them the ammunition, both communication as well as some practices, education? So motivating consumers, collaborating with customers, which are the intermediaries that buy from you, like a large retailer. I'll just tell you right now, Walmart has woken up. We all used to criticize Walmart. They destroyed the local merchants, wiped out the community, mom and pop stores were gone. Walmart has woken up. Today, the toughest audit, if you want to qualify as a Walmart supplier, you have to meet an environmental audit. I'm involved in a company that provides the product through Walmart, which is a must customer. You cannot get away from selling through Walmart as a market primarily, and that audit is incredible. This is an aluminum company, and they provide consumer aluminum sheets, all the stuff. Huge pressure by a customer on you as a supplier. This is the reverse thing around it. Inspiring employees. What are you doing in your homes? Not just when you are at the office space. We may not have cups anymore. We may not have bottles, but at home, what are you doing? Can we motivate our employees to say, please carry on these processes that you are doing at corporation in your home environment? That is where the biggest footprint happens anyhow, especially from a carbon viewpoint. Here are the enablers. Suppliers are your enablers. Can you nurture them to invest into environmentally compliant products? Attracting investors. By the way, there are now impact funds which are outperforming the market. In the book, we have identified that. Which says it pays off. to practice triple bottom line. Investing in communities. There is a huge NGO community, which is one stakeholder. We have never worked together. Kimberly-Clark had an absolutely antagonistic NGO, Greenpeace, who you know has become a political movement now in Europe and in England, surprisingly. Greenpeace absolutely was having protest after protest. One day the management woke up and said, why are we fighting? Can we find a common ground where we can cooperate together for a third party, which is called the environment, the sustainability, coming out from a combative relationship to a partnering relationship. So leveraging media, I tell you, we can literally influence the media to have the news, right news. So it's our job to do it. Rather than saying what media would like to sensationalize, can we do that thing? So media is a very important one. I'm recommending to the corporations that you actually ask governments to pass laws which will be not only for you but the whole industry, which means it's equalizer. So bad players go out of business. And it seems to resonate again. And the last one is engaging the NGOs. NGO power will grow. And I'll just make one comment. There's a lot of material. I will stop. One comment is fascinating. What I find is that corporations created foundations, charitable arms, right? CSR. Today, foundations are starting to own corporations to insulate them from the shareholder pressure, investor pressure. Hershey Chocolates is owned by a foundation. They don't look for quarterly returns. John Wiley & Sons, I just found out the publisher. It has gone to the foundation. Families are trustees of the foundation, and foundation doesn't demand dividends. The expectation is that the large foundations like Gates Foundation will own billions of dollars of revenue corporations and then mandate share value as a measurement because they are not subject to institutional investors. Our institutional investors, the largest one is CalPERS, California employee. Second largest is where I belong, my retirement called TIA. They're all now saying, we will be investing only if you comply with triple bottom line thinking. So when your own investor is putting pressure on you, it seems to work very well. So they are called supporters as a third category, and each chapter is written with a case study best in class worldwide. So my colleague and I interviewed, hour and a half, 2 hours, got the documents, used them as a case study, and then we said, all right, what can we learn if you want to be sort of nurturing suppliers, which does the best job? And that's what this is all about. I will stop here. We'll have some dialogue, questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much, Professor Sheth, for this very enlightening exposition on sustainability. Before I kick off and ask the audience to ask whatever questions and seek clarifications and any doubts you might have, let me kick it off by straight away asking you, sir. We are trying to create this cadre of professionals in the area of sustainability, CSR, innovation, as I had mentioned. Each of them would face the kind of resistance that you showed us in your very powerful presentation. What would be your advice as to how they propagate this throughout the corporation and build it into the very DNA of the corporation?
We are going through that journey. You cannot mandate employees. We think we can do it as bosses. Leadership style has, can you hear me okay? Leadership style has changed from command and control, which was called Theory X in HR, to, it's okay now, right? To actually not only Theory Y, he's a human being, treat with respect, dignity, give him the hours that he can spend time with family. Today, it has even changed further. It is all about what I created, actually, Theory U. The role of the leader is a little more, oh, that's okay. role of the leader is actually, oh, my colleague says I must drink, so I will drink.
Water or spirits is the question.
After the presentation, with the dinner maybe, so you're right. It's very interesting that next style of leadership to retain employees. I'll tell you a quick example because anecdotes matter.
Yes, sir.
In Singapore, labor market is so tight. You do all these resumes that come hundreds. You do the interviews and you hire a young person. Well, first of all, young people today say, I want to talk to the vice president. Recruiter is not enough. And the question they ask is not, what's my salary? What's my career? Question is, what are you doing for the planet? And senior executives are dumbfounded because they never expected that question from a 21, 22-year-old kid. That's the passion today. So in Singapore, it's so bad, you recruit all this stuff, put all this effort, the person comes there one day and says, I quit. So you do the exit interviews. What happened? I just don't like it here. What's your next job? I have none. Because they always have parents taking back them. My generation, you worked for a corporation and you stayed till you retired. They have no sense of loyalty today. How long is your horizon? Maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years. It's interesting. So it is our responsibility. How do you retain the talent? Unlike in the old days, where the employee felt, what a great opportunity a public sector enterprise has given me, gets my potential out, gives me responsibility. Today is the reverse. So the new style of leadership is what we call coaching and mentoring. Don't use the word boss. It's negative. They turn themselves off now. And mentoring and therefore coaches in athletics do a great job. You find that in athletics, coaches are never in the limelight. You don't know the name of the coach for a tennis player or for gymnastics, but you know the player. A top gymnastics becomes. So how do you spotlight on the employees and make them? We are basically diamond cutters. We are in the business of polishing the rough diamond that we got of the society and creates brilliance out of that one so they can contribute back to society.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much, sir. We have another question from Mr. K.K. Sharma of DCM Shriram Limited. He says that in your presentation you mentioned sustainability and shared value creation will be harder to imitate. Can you give us an example, sir?
Most of the changes in sustainability journey, like the quality, has less to do with people per se, mindset, but has more to do with processes. And processes are very hard to duplicate. Keep that. Innovation in the future, as the course goes into, will happen on conservation. And I will tell you, for countries like China and India, which are the next growth engines for the world, and others will come along. Indonesia is knocking the doors. Maybe part of Africa will be awakened in the process. And that journey, neither the capital nor the technology will be the showstopper. Showstopper will be the environment. So emerging markets actually have to lead this rather than follow the Western world. Which is why China will mandate, I think next year alone, my memory, all vehicles going forward will be electric, whether you like it or not.
Sir, can we take one more question? Anyone interested?
I'm going on and on.
No, you're welcome, sir. Any other question? Yes, please, go ahead.
He's a tough guy, which is good.
Please.
Yes.
So, just the evidence to the hypothesis that we developed the Foundation Corporation. I remember the talk that you had 7 years back. I tested that in Austrian market. I got the data. There are almost 300 companies which converted into foundation.
Right. Wow.
So I think it is changing. I had a question, but you already answered it in the previous one, that Dow Jones had died. So do you think these sustainability index or indices are going to be more sustainable?
No.
Not the West. Okay.
I think we will look more and more toward Asia for change because it's necessary for them to survive.
I meant East means Asia.
Yeah, right. So that's East will be the one where we are watching. Surprisingly, one lead nation toward this behind the scenes is Japan. Just please, we don't understand Japanese language, we don't read their scientific work, the investment, and they are focusing on the home, which is where the biggest footprint is. I think it will happen, China will lead is our forecast. Will surpass US in terms of environmental initiatives. They have no choice. They have to clean up. By the way, I just will take one more comment. When I went to the States in 1961, two most polluted cities were Los Angeles and Pittsburgh, where I was at Pittsburgh. You couldn't say anything. They cleaned it up. California passed massive environmental laws on automobiles. Automobile companies were complaining it's not cost effective. They all complied. Pittsburgh took a stand finally. Their water was so polluted, the river was totally polluted. You can smell phenol in the water, and they make it drinkable water. And finally, through a lot of court studies, putting huge fines on the companies for environmental damage, creating products which were not carcinogenic, for example, long term. Companies had to declare bankruptcy protection to get out of the obligations. Asbestos, company that made, was gone. So today we think the real enforcer may not be the legislation, the body, or the regulators even, but will be the courts. In the US, courts have transformed more corporations, not just the civil side, but the corporate side than any other entity, not the legislators, because I can do lobbying and our contributions are above the table, which I like, not under the table, around the table. And I'm saying parties need money, so what else is new? I contribute as an individual to any candidate who is pro-India, Indian or non-Indian. I have a rule. I have a limit about how much I can contribute before the primary, then after the primary. Right now I'm nurturing somebody in Austin, Texas, an economics guy who became medical doctor. He's just unhappy. He worries about his children. And he thinks the only Indian, Patel, and he thinks the only way out is for him to get into the parliament, our Congress. We had at the same meeting 2 weeks ago, Raja Krishnamurthy from Chicago with the Democrats now. He's becoming a very significant committee member, and they like him. Non-Indian majority legislators have embraced him. Ro Khanna, who is in Silicon Valley, these are the rising stars who are all of Indian origin. The whole caucus has shifted now, and they are influencing. So my view is that I think in America, it's more the courts that will decide the future and the fate of the companies. Massive. I mean, think about Johnson & Johnson right now. Or the pharmaceutical companies on opioids.
Sure.
Massive penalties.
Thank you, sir, for a very, very wonderful exposition. We're deeply grateful to you. You'll be happy to learn, for example, that these courses now that we are going to unroll, our law and the rules, when we made them, took care of the fact that such courses which are now coming up, they can actually be shown as part of the CSR spend that the company makes. We're actually included, capacity development and skill upgradation in part of the CSR spend. So that is a very happy trend. The other thing that is a big takeaway is the foundation corporation. Now, when we were drafting the CSR law, I had no idea that how many foundations would come into existence after the law came into being. And today you see that a lot of that transition, which has happened already in Europe and America, coming to India in such a big way. Because the culture of the corporation and the culture of the foundation were earlier on so distinct and so completely different that merging, that blurring of lines to bring the spirit of the foundation into the corporation is actually happening. So thank you very, very much, sir. With that, I think we need to break. We'll answer other questions over dinner, I think. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything.